So I know y'all wondered why I wore a suit today. We're doing something a little bit different in 2021. On the third Sunday morning of each month, one of the elders will be speaking. They may be preaching, I don't know, but I'm not preaching. I'm just talking to you. But every third Sunday morning, one of the elders will be in front of you. So hope that that will be of some encouragement to you. I know it'll be an encouragement to us that are doing it. Also, on that third Sunday, that Sunday night, we will be singing. So in addition to our fifth Wednesday night singings, we're going to have third Sunday night singings. So we're going to sing more in 2021 than we have in the past. So please make your plans to come back tonight at 5 o'clock and participate in a song service. I don't know about you. I always find those very encouraging and uplifting. I think God had a special intent in mind when he created music. And the sound of voices in harmony is really, it's encouraging to hear. It's beautiful to us. Of course, God's listening to our hearts. But singing is an awesome way of expressing praise. So hopefully you'll be able to come back tonight and participate in that. So this morning's lesson is simple, and it's short. The outline for it's on the front page of your bulletin. Kim asked me this week if I had an insert, and I told her I won't have an insert. And then she said, well, will you have something for the front? I said, yeah, I'll have something for the front. So I thought I would just combine the two and make the outline be what we see on the front page of the bulletin. My intent this morning is to encourage you. That's my intention. With the message this morning, I want you to be encouraged. I want you to be built up. I want you to feel good. There was a Roman poet from the first century, actually from around the time that Jesus was born, who made the statement, the spirited horse will try to win the race of its own accord. He will run even faster if encouraged. So I want to encourage you this morning. I hope that you find what we talk about in these next few minutes encouraging. Matthew chapter 5. This is a passage that we all have memorized. It's a passage that our children sing a song about. And to me, it is a passage of great encouragement. I don't know why it is. Maybe it's just a human nature to always tend to think more about the negative than we do the positive. I appreciate, Johnny, your prayer this morning. The things you said in that. A lot of times we're afraid. A lot of times we're weak. We're anxious. We're discouraged. We have self-doubt. We carry those things around with us a lot. We don't necessarily let people see those, We do our best to put on the good face and let people think that we're okay when a lot of times we're not. There's a lot of negative things that we have to deal with. Sin is another. You know, we find ourselves a lot of times in the same situation Paul was in when he wrote in Romans chapter 7. You know, the good things I want to do, I don't do, and the things that I shouldn't do, that's what I do. So we struggle. There's a lot of negative things in our heads. So I want to try this morning to replace those with a good positive thought. At the end of chapter 4, Matthew, we see that Jesus has gained quite a following of people. He's been preaching that the kingdom of heaven is near, and he's been healing people. He's been performing miracles, and that's got people's attention. And so he has people from lots of places that are following him, from Galilee and from the 10 cities and from Jerusalem, and they're from all over the place. And they want to hear what he has to say. And so one day, Jesus walks up on the side of a mountain, and he sits down and he begins teaching. And that's the beginning in chapter 5 of what we know as the Sermon on the Mount. I think you would be hard-pressed to find 3 chapters in your New Testament that are as rich and as deep as what Jesus tells these folks in his sermon. He starts off with the Beatitudes. He starts off with a positive thought. And he tells people, here's how to be happy. Here's how to be truly happy. And probably a lot of us have memorized the Beatitudes. I remember I had to do that when I was in school. I had to memorize the Beatitudes. I'm not sure I could say them all to you now, because that was a lot of years ago, but I could get pretty close. Those things are important, and they're positive. They're good. They are things that are right for Jesus' disciples. And after that, he moves down, and he's going to use an expression that, again, we've seen it many times. And I'll be honest, often I've just kind of slid right over it, thinking that, you know, I've already seen that. I already know what that's about. I think one of the interesting things, one of the encouraging things that we take from Scripture is the way that believers are labeled. And Peter does this in 1 Peter, in his letter there. And you'll probably recall these words. He tells these Christians in the first century that he's writing to, he says, you are a chosen generation. That makes you special. To be chosen. You are a royal priesthood. Not everybody is royalty in the world. In fact, very few people are royalty. We don't really have that in this country, per se. We have it to some degree with some families, but we're not like England or these other countries who have royalty with special privileges. We don't have that. But that's what believers are. Believers are viewed as royalty. Believers are viewed as priests. If you go back to the Old Testament and look, the priests were very special people. They were the only ones who could interface and interact with God. They did that on behalf of the people. Now, you're special like that too. Peter even says, you're a special people. John calls believers children. And Jesus called believers friend. Those are some pretty positive labels that are attached to being a believer. And right in there with those positive labels is this one in Matthew chapter 5. Let's begin in verse 13, and we'll go through verse 15. You, Jesus says to his disciples there on the side of the mountain, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It's then good for nothing, but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. These are some of the first words that Jesus spoke as far as his preaching went. Later on, he's going to make the statement, I am the light of the world. John the Baptist even talked about Jesus being the light of the world. So do you see how positive Matthew 5:14 is to you and me as believers? Jesus said, I am the light of the world, and before he ever made that statement, he said, you are the light of the world. We should take real encouragement from that thought coming from our Savior. Believers are the light of the world. I really think, I don't know for sure if I'm right about this or not. You know, we read there in verse 13 where Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. I believe that Jesus was talking to these people who were Jewish, that they are the influence among the Jewish nation. That's why you see the word earth there. It's talking about the land of Palestine. So among the people, among the Jews in the land of Palestine, you're the salt of those people. Then in verse 14, he expands the idea. You same people are also an influence to the Gentile world, to everybody else outside of the area of Palestine. So we can place ourselves in with this idea of what's presented in verse 14. We're the light of the world. We are the light of the world. Think about that. Let that kind of sink in for a little bit. That Jesus says, you're the light of the world. So on the front page of the bulletin, I just jotted down some 4 thoughts about light. If you study light, and I'm not a physics major by any stretch, but that's a pretty interesting study, pretty fascinating to study light. And so what you have on the front of your bulletin is very elementary. It's not anything over anybody's head, I don't think. But the first point there is that light is energy. Light is energy. And when we hear the word energy, we think of 2 things. We think of something moving and something that is coming from a source. A light in our room comes from a light bulb, comes from a source. The energy to get that light to turn on comes through electricity. There's a source for energy. Light is energy. So from those two perspectives, if we look at the source, what is our source? If Jesus says, hey, believers, you are the light of the world, what's the believer's source? Where does the believer's power come from? Paul prayed for the Ephesians, and he wrote that they would understand the exceeding greatness of God's power toward us who believe. He also told them to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Paul will tell Timothy in one of his letters, he said, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. Our faith stands in the power of God. Paul said that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 5. We're connected. We, believers, the light, are connected to God. I think it's in one of the letters to Timothy, Paul says, God dwells in unapproachable light. God is light. That's where our strength comes from. And we have it. If we will stop for a few minutes and think about who we are, what's been done for us, the power that we have, in all the ways that we think we're weak, in all the ways that we think we fail, in all the ways that we consider ourselves inadequate, those will come. You won't be able to keep those from coming, but don't let them stay. Don't let those things stay in your mind. Let this stay in your mind. I am strong because of God. He's my source. Energy also implies the idea of movement, action, doing things. It's obvious that Jesus expected his disciples in the Sermon on the Mount to be active. He tells them, let people see what you do. Let people see what you do so that they can glorify God. Now later on, he's going to warn them about this very idea. Don't let people see what you're doing so that you can feel good about yourself. And that's a temptation we're going to have too. We want somebody to pat us on the back. We want somebody to acknowledge. And Jesus says, nope, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, as part of who you are as a believer, let your actions and the things you do be such that people will see them. Not that you do them for show, but they will be seen. Jesus was involved in people's lives. He cared for people. We read about how he wept when Lazarus died. We read about the compassion he had for people who were doing without. Jesus taught people. He spoke. Paul and Peter talk at length in their letters about our behavior, the way we just live, the things we do every day, from day to day. People see those things. And we don't do them to be seen. We do them because that's what light does. Light is active. Light moves. James teaches us that a faith without works or without action is a dead faith. And that lines up right with what Jesus is saying in this passage. You're the light of the world, and you're going to do things. You're going to do good things. And people are going to see those things that you're doing, and they're going to glorify God. Not you. They're going to glorify God because of the things you do. So every part of your life, people will see. So our attitudes, our words, all those things can be positive. I'm not much of a social media person. And here lately, I'm even less of one than I have been. Because that stuff, a lot of it is not positive. You know that. But I do see a lot of you post things that are good. I see you post things that are encouraging. I see you post Bible verses. I see those things. And I'm encouraged by that. So those kind of things, keep doing. Keep doing. That's exactly what Jesus is wanting his believers, his followers, to do. Point number 2, light eliminates darkness. And I know you're going to look at me like, wow, that's profound. We all know that. Dark room, turn on the light, and the darkness is gone. That's a concept that's really simple. You know, even our children understand that. In Scripture, goodness and evil are often paralleled with light and darkness. Before John the Baptist was wrote, his father Zacharias prophesied and said, "And you, child," talking about John the Baptist, "will be called the prophet of the highest. For you will go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of our God, with which the day spring from on high has visited us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace." Jesus told Nicodemus in John chapter 3, he says, "And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in God." Jesus also said, "He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going." John 12:35. Many people in the time of Jesus did not understand the truth about why he was on the earth and what he was doing. His religious leaders rejected him. There were a lot of people that just didn't care. To them, he was just some guy talking with some sort of different ideas. The world in general was dark. And you and I know that today it's not a bit different. It's not a bit different today. There are people who are out there that outright reject Jesus. There are people out there who don't care. There are people out there who are belligerent toward religious people. The world's a dark place. But you and I can be a light in that darkness. People can see how we behave. They can see the words we use. They can see the way we treat other people. They can see the way we treat each other. And we may not think they notice. And we may think that, okay, so what? But they notice. As believers, we are the light. Jesus, if you'll notice, he didn't say try to be the light. He didn't say that. He said you are the light. So there's no trying. It's being. He'll take care of the results. We often like to think about, we're result oriented. A lot of us are. We want to see results. We want to do something. We want to see the result. And that's good and that's helpful, but we need to not worry about the result. God will take care of the result. We're the light, and this is the way we live. Let your actions speak. Let your words proclaim who Jesus is and what he did. And you can drive out darkness in this way. Point number 3, light is absorbed. When we go outside, we absorb light. Some of us will turn red. Some of us will turn brown. That's because we've absorbed some light. So the idea here is we live our lives so that those around us, both believer and non-believer, absorb what comes from us. Our kids absorb it. Our co-workers absorb it. Our boss absorbs it. Our employees absorb it. People in our neighborhood absorb it. People in our town. It's one of those things that you can't do anything about. It's absorbed. So it's so important for us to realize that being the light, we need to do that in a way that what is absorbed is good. Peter tells his listeners, his readers, he says, have your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. You may not think you're making a difference, but you are. You are. And when somebody gets to the point where they see how you live and how you behave, and they ask you, what's up with you? Why? Again, Peter says, always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, in meekness and in fear. And Paul told the Colossians, he said, walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, those who are not believers, redeeming the time, and let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. We have an awesome reason for living this way. We have an awesome reason to live in a way that brings hope to people who are searching. And they're out there. People are out there searching. We have an awesome reason to explain why we believe what we believe. Jesus died for you. He died for me. He died for every person. That's the reason. That's the reason why we live like we live. That's why we are the light. Last point number 4, light can be combined. Jesus made the statement, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And if you visualize that in your mind, you can see that. A city is made up of many people. And there are many lights in a city. And if it's on a hill and it's dark, you can see it. A city down in a hole, maybe not so much, but a city on a hill, you can see. A single point of light, which you are, and which I am. Jesus said, don't put it under a basket. A lot of times we do that without really realizing that we're doing it. And a lot of times the reason that basket is placed over your light is because you're not connected to other people who are shining their light. We use a verse many times about assembling together. Hebrews 10:25, don't forsake it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times in the past we kind of made that a rule. It's a rule. It's a rule you got to go to church. It's not a rule. It's not a rule. It's the thing to do because of who you are and who you want to be with. Just like this morning. We will stand up in front of a group of people and say to you, just sitting in that pew there is not enough. There's more to it than that. And that's true. That's true. But there's a lot to it. There's a lot to you sitting in that pew this morning. There really is. The idea of a lot of lights together magnifies the influence. When the people in our community see that the Rogersville Church of Christ did this, or the Rogersville Church of Christ did this, they see us together. They see us as a city on a hill. They can't help but see. It's important that we do things that allow people to see us. And you're doing those things. I've seen them. The elders meet every week practically, and we talk about things, and we see the good things you're doing. Larry mentioned this morning about how tough last year was and the impacts that a lot of churches have felt and seen to their contribution because of COVID. But we really didn't see a problem here. You kept doing what you needed to do. You kept doing what was asked. You're being the light. Keep being the light. It's who we are. Jesus told us that. You are the light of the world. Is that not an encouraging thought? I hope that it is. It was to me. Are you connected? Are you connected to the source? Are you connected to God? If you're not, the obvious question is why? The obvious question is why? Do you believe in God's power to save you through Jesus? his son? Do you believe Jesus is God's son? Are you willing to confess that? Are you willing to give the answer of a good conscience toward God, which is baptism, to become part of this group of believers, not just here in Rogersville, but across the world, the entire body of Christ, so that you can be a light, so that you can be an encouragement, so that you can do for others, so that you can go to heaven. If you're not there, you can do that this morning. We'd be glad to help you with that. If your light's been burning a little bit dim, maybe not like you want it, you can probably take care of that where you're sitting. If you'd like prayers to help, we can do that too. We're here to help you this morning. We're going to sing a song to encourage you. If we can help in any way, please come as we sing.